Alfa Romeo was an Italian industrialist who had bought the Alfa company who manufactured the Lombard car. In 1919, decided to add his own surname and created the Alfa Romeo car company. With designers like Giuseppe Moroso and Vittorio Jano, he produced some of the most exciting sports and racing cars ever seen. They won all the major races like the Mille Miglia, Targa Florio, the Le Mans 24 Hours, and every Grand Prix that they ever entered. After World War II, Alfa Romeo had to enter the world of mass production. In conjunction with Lucio Bertoni's design studio, Orazio Sata, who was head of development at Alfa Romeo, came up with the answer. And this is it, the Giulietta Sprint. It was launched at the Turin Auto Show of May of 1954. The styling is by the great Franco Scaglione, and the ingenious twin overhead cam four-cylinder engine was designed by Giuseppe Busso. The successful idea was that these cars would be for every man and woman, and that families could finally afford a great car for the road. But Alfa Romeo soon realized that a version of this car that was lighter, with more power, would be needed if it was to prove itself in competition. And that is what we have here, the Sprint Veloce. Veloce, of course, being Italian for fast. What I notice immediately with this car is how light the steering is, and I think that's probably down to these Pirelli Cinturato tires that were original equipment. The Sprint was the first Alfa designed specifically for radial ply tires, which had really only been invented a little before this car first came out. And this gearbox is lovely. It's got synchromesh on all 4 speeds, which was quite unusual for the time. All this attention soon paid off, because in the 1956 running of the Mille Miglia, Alfa Romeo had entered something over 30 of these Alleggerita lightweight homologation specials. At first glance, there may not seem like there's a lot of difference between the Sprint and the Sprint Veloce, but have a look under here. That 4-cylinder engine's been canted over to accommodate twin Weber carburetors, 40 DCOEs, sang cast. Try finding those. There's a full 4-branch exhaust manifold here. And look at this little tweak. This cold air duct here sends cold air into the cockpit of the Sprint. But in the Veloce, it feeds the air filter, which feeds the cold air box, vents the carburetors, giving you more horsepower. That's a little trick that Alfa's learned from their Alfetta Grand Prix car, with which Fangio won the World Championship in 1951. The fuel tank was enlarged from 14 gallons to 21 gallons, and the compression ratio of the engine up from 8:1 to 9:1. They had an electrical fuel pump as well that replaced the mechanical pump. They even replaced the heavy metal bumpers with these lightweight aluminium versions. These eyebrows were made out of aluminium as well. And even the headlamp rims were made out of aluminium. The SVs had aluminium bonnets, boot lids and doors, and heavy items like glass were done away with where possible. These are Perspex side windows here. They even left the lid off the glove box for weight saving. This is the tunnel-cased 4-speed gearbox. Nice light clutch pressure, slips into first nicely. Bit of help from the Webers. Off I go. Sprints and Sprint Veloces in particular got a lot of body rot and rust, and that's why there's so few of them about. If they weren't crashed in rallies and races, they could rot away very easily. I don't think Alfa Romeo had learned to bonderize the bodies at that stage of their production. Which means that if you ever do get your hands on one of these cars, I wouldn't advise selling it because you may never get another one. It's a strange thing, but very little is known about these cars by most people. They've heard of the Sprints, but the Sprint Veloce is a very rare beast indeed. Look where we are now, up in the mountains. Not that far really from Portello in the north of Milan, where this car was born in 1957. But I could be in the 1957 Mille Miglia, heading down the Raticosa Pass or the Futa Pass, leading my class in the last Mille Miglia they ever had, of course, 1957. Maybe I managed to buy this car from Alfa Romeo at a friendly price because I promised to race it in the Mille Miglia. You know, I get a great deal of joy from driving just about any tasty vehicle from a bygone era. But to have a well-sorted Alfa Romeo Sprint Veloce to blast around the mountains here, just north of Milano, where the car was built, and to use most of the power, most of the time, through all the twists and turns, well, that's as good as it needs to get for me. Really, total bliss. Well, enough of that. Got to give the car back to its owner.